Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to the Midday News on 3FM and 92.7. My name is Beatrice Adu. The news is also live on Kasmi 107.1 FM and across the world at renews.com. Coming up in the next 30 minutes. Minority in Parliament accuses government of using what it describes as a disingenuous accounting arrangement that shifts the financial risk of domestic gold program onto the Bank of Ghana. We'll bring you more. Also on the program this afternoon, Cybersecurity Authority fines EY Ghana 360,000 Ghana cedis over license breach, consequently ordering EY Ghana to halt unlicensed cyber services. And much later on the program, Young Cocoa Farmers Association petitions President John Mahama to provide urgent clarity on key issues ahead of 2026-2027 cocoa purchasing season. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. The minority in Parliament is accusing the government of using what it describes as a, quote, disingenuous accounting arrangement, unquote, that shifts the financial risk of the domestic gold program onto the Bank of Ghana and ultimately the taxpayer. It cites the IMF's report as saying the program generated losses of about $1.6 billion, equivalent to roughly 1.5% of Ghana's gross domestic product in 2025. The minority is therefore asking whether the gold board program is genuinely profitable, arguing that the losses carried by the Bank of Ghana cannot simply be separated from the program's overall financial performance. We'll speak to our parliamentary correspondent very shortly, but first of all, let's hear exactly what Alexander Penyomarkin said in that press conference a while ago.
What we are witnessing is a disingenuous accounting arrangement, clean on the surface, dirty in substance, and it is ordinary Ghanaian taxpayer who is left carrying the risk. That ends today. We are asking straightforward questions, and we expect straightforward answers. Who are the off-takers? Why were sales discounted? And why is the mandate to trade gold on the country's behalf producing losses the country was never told about? Now, let me deal with the numbers Ghana cannot ignore. The IMF tells us that 17% of the value of every ounce of gold sold by the Bank of Ghana simply disappeared. It vanished into the gap between the rates paid to miners and the rate used for the books. Add the fees paid to the middlemen. Add the discounts handed to off-takers. This is not rounding error. This is not teething trouble. This is a structural bleeding of our national purse. And it was not the opposition that found it. I repeat, it was the IMF's own economists. And the government has accepted that indeed these losses are true. Now look at what this bleeding has done to our central bank. By the fund's own numbers, the Bank of Ghana's equity stood at negative 93.8 billion cedis at the end of last year, negative 6.7% of GDP. Our central bank is technically bankrupt, therefore. And the single biggest driver of that collapse in the 2025 was gold operations, Gold Board. Gold Board's own domain, 22 billion cedis. That's equivalent of the 1.7 billion US dollars in 1 year alone. Therefore, ladies and gentlemen, let's call it what it is. These losses are not bad luck. You don't trade in gold and make losses. They are not a difficult market. They expose the crass incompetence of Gold Board's management and misaligned policy of the government. No serious institution loses this much money by accident. This is what happens when an untouchable few are handed the nation's gold with no one watching. and no one willing to ask questions. Ghanaians have already sacrificed much to keep this economy standing. We tighten our belt for the sake of stability. That is why it is so painful to watch this scheme quietly give away sums that will make any right-thinking citizens weep. We did not endure hardship so that billions could vanish into unexplained spread and unnamed off-takers. Let us be honest about what $1.7 billion actually means. It is hospitals that will not be built. It is needless maternal death that would not be prevented.
And you heard Alexander Apanyomarking. He is the minority leader in Parliament. Christian Yale is our parliamentary affairs correspondent. He monitored this press conference. He joins us live on the phone. Chris, what else can you tell us about what the minority leader said?
Yes, so essentially Alexander Apanyomarking is accusing the Gold Board of hiding behind the Bank of Ghana to dodge accountability over the figure he quoted, the $1.7 billion loss, which he said is a real loss and not one that one could use PR about it. In fact, he essentially has challenged Gold Board's accounting procedure and is demanding answers over who bought the gold and why some sales were allegedly made at discounted prices. He has described all that is playing out as a structural bleeding of state resources. Now, one thing that he also questions is how the Gold Board could report earnings or surplus when, according to him, some transaction costs were borne by the central bank. And so, in the end of that presser, he indicated that the minority has already prepared a motion that they would file once Parliament resumes from recess to summon the Gold Board Chief Executive, Sammy Gyamfi, to come to Parliament for a parliamentary probe and for questions. Now, he has already signaled the majority not to, poo-poo this one or step it aside, because I know also that in the last sitting of Parliament, in the last meeting, there were instances that some of these questions were raised and they were seeking to get responses but that did not really materialize. In fact, he makes the case, and among the other things that he said, that when you look at what the Auditor General has put out, indeed, the minority would admit that it is the Auditor General that has conducted its audit, but they are of the view that the Auditor General was not granted access to the full picture or the full problem at the Gold Board. And so if the Auditor General knew that the cost of the Gold Board transactions were borne by the Bank of Ghana, then it wouldn't have declared a surplus in its accounting reporting. And so these are the issues that the minority has raised concerning Gold Board. We know that already there's been some level of response already, because then the minority leader, even before this press conference, had been, speaking on some platforms and been speaking about this, and there's been some responses from the Gold Board, which has been trying to clarify what the purported losses mean and what really is accounting for them.
Indeed, because yesterday there was a statement put on the X page of the CEO, Sammy Gyamfi, indicating that the Gold Board made profits of about 907 million Ghana cedis or dollars. And so the minority leader, I heard him, Alexander Apanyomarking, I heard him say that perhaps the only reason that the Auditor General might not have cited that was because it didn't have the full picture. How did he reconcile it with what he claims he has as facts?
In fact, he had shown us some documents from the International Monetary Fund, which report from the IMF is what has largely, generated this conversation around the Ghana Gold Board, and indicates that the minority as a group would not just, make claims for partisan interest or for partisan reasons. And so he even asked the media more or less to abreast themselves of the reports from the IMF, so that when government spokespersons try to, step aside the raw fact, as it were, the media could put them aright. But he is largely of the view that whatever explanations are given, the gold board shouldn't make losses by selling gold, and that they are of the view as a minority that the gold board is responsible for causing financial loss to the state. And one thing he adds is that they should remember that there would definitely be a post-regime accountability that is awaiting the gold board.
Indeed, thank you very much. And that was Christian Yale, he's our parliamentary affairs correspondent. We're joined on the line now by Dr. Peter Tekpe. He's a financial and economic policy analyst. Good afternoon to you, sir. Thank you very much for joining us.
Good afternoon, and thanks for having me, and good afternoon to your cherished listeners.
I want to believe that you had the opportunity to listen to the minority leader, Alexander Penyomarkin, a while ago as he led his group in that press conference. And indeed, he's interpreting the IMF's reported $1.67 billion loss as evidence that the domestic gold purchasing program is fundamentally flawed because it's bleeding the public purse, as it were. Will you call that a fair interpretation of the facts we have on our hands?
Well, I think that we are confusing ourselves with this whole gold board financial, report. And it appears that everybody is interpreting it from what he or she is taking from the report. Every institution is being audited. And we all know the Auditor General has been auditing all state institutions over the years. And we use their report, and the politicians also use the same Auditor General report to make decisions and also to, actually surcharge people and aftermath reports and whatever. Yet the situation where the same Auditor General has made a report and is indicating that there is a surplus. Now, if the minority is saying that there are certain information that they think that the Auditor General is not privy to, that is a different matter altogether, where they can file for those questions to be answered, because auditing report is a different thing altogether. So if you have your own source of getting certain kind of information and you think that those information will have helped the auditors, it's a matter of filing for it and then finding out, because auditors have their opinion that they express on their report. Apart from that, IMF also made their own report, and IMF is also looking at certain parameters. And so you cannot pick one report and then ignore the other and think that the other report is better than the IMF report.
So where would you stand? Where would you stand then? IMF reporting $1.6 billion loss, and then our own the Auditor General giving us 907 billion Ghana cedi surplus.
So my stand is that there are two reports that have been issued. We don't ignore one and then accept the other. What you do is that you look at each of them separately. What is the auditor's report saying, and what is the IMF report also saying? They are all communicating different outcomes. And so what you have to do is that, what are the factors that are contributing to the outcome of IMF report, and what are the factors that are also contributing to the outcome of the Auditor General's report? Then you can better appreciate it. Because if you want to give us a real objective analysis of what has happened, tell us that this is what the IMF report analyzed, and this is what IMF report is saying. This is what auditor's report also analyzed, and this is what they are saying. So for me, I am looking at the auditor's report. The auditor's report is telling us that they've made a surplus. If you want to do analysis of any other report, that is an additional information that you are looking up to. Because IMF is also looking at it from what their expectation is. And you cannot ignore the Auditor General's report and then accept the IMF report, and then tomorrow when Auditor General comes out with a report and then it suits your expectation, then you are going to accept it. It doesn't happen that way. So for me, let us have an objective analysis of the report on separate basis. Break down the IMF report, break down the Auditor General's report, and let Ghanaians better appreciate what is in there. But it is appearing to us that we are just ignoring the Auditor General's report. They are also professionals who have also done their professional work. Why do you ignore their report? So this is where I stand. That let us do an objective analysis for Ghanaians to better appreciate the communication that we are putting out there, so that it doesn't appear like Auditor General didn't do a good job.
And indeed, that was the question I
Otherwise-
was asking you. As a professional, have you yourself personally looked at both the IMF and the Auditor General's report? And where do you stand if you've done that, your own understanding of these two figures being given us?
So for me, I will look at the Auditor General's report, because that the Auditor General report is the one that we have all been used to. And so my analysis of the Auditor General report for operational purposes, there is operational about 109 million US dollars. And so if there is anything at all, it's the IMF report that I have not gone into this. But for the auditor's report I have seen, I think that we must appreciate the work that the Auditor General has done. If there is anything at all, let us look at what the IMF is looking at, and then we can better make decision on that. But for now, I am going with the Auditor General report, because that is a report that I've been studying and everybody has been studying, and that's what Parliament have even been using as well for their questioning. And so you cannot ignore them completely. That's why I'll go for the Auditor General's report.
Doc, thank you very much for speaking to us.
You're welcome.
And he had Dr. Peter Tekpe. He is a financial and economic policy analyst. 16 minutes past the hour of 12. When we come back, I'll bring you more. Stay with us.
Freezer, get the abba. Adam for the abba. A freezer. Adam.
And you're still here on the Midday News on Shri FM 92.7. Now, the National Anti-Illegal Mining Operations Secretariat, NIMOS, has intervened in a violent clash involving suspected illegal miners operating in the Atiwa Forest Reserve in the eastern region. The confrontation, which reportedly involved machetes, left one person seriously injured. Although no arrests were made during the reconnaissance, the task force destroyed 15 makeshift structures and 11 water pumping machines believed to be supporting illegal mining operations. The information gathered from local sources suggests that a significant number of illegal miners may still be operating within the reserve. Let's speak to Daryl Bosso, who is Deputy National Director, Rosha Ghana. He joins us live on the phone. Good afternoon to you, sir. Thank you very much for joining us.
Good afternoon, Beatrice. A pleasure to be here.
Let me hear your interpretation of what's going on in the Atiwa Forest, despite all the efforts seemingly being made by NIMOS.
Well, okay, so I think what we have been observing for a long time, and this even started last year, where the Forestry Commission incessantly talked about increasing and escalating encroachment of illegal miners in the forest reserve. And several reports have been made to the police, to the local assembly and all of that. But we've not seen very decisive action. There are sometimes a few occasions that the Forestry Commission has organized raids through their rapid response team. But I think that because this has been not been at the level that meets the level of encroachment, the miners always go and they come back. And this is way beyond the capacity of the Forestry Commission. So what we have seen within the beginning of the year right up to now, serious encroachment for different areas, significant numbers of illegal miners operating in this in parts of the Atiwa Forest by day and by night. And the unfortunate thing is that right now, the forestry staff at Chebi are so overwhelmed that they're not able to bring this under control. So what these miners do is that they seriously have an opportunity and they are really taking advantage of it. Serious impunity going on. And this is what led to the clashes that was reported over the weekend. And aside that, I think the whole issue is that if you look at the entire Chebi landscape, mining has so escalated in the area that there is no way a forest reserve like Atiwa will be left untouched. And so I think there needs to be very strong action. That's what we are seeing. We've not seen it for some time now. 9 months is on the ground, but we don't think that they have the necessary manpower and the logistics to be able to handle the kind of menace that we are seeing rearing its head within that particular area. So I think that the forest is just receiving more of a collateral damage now with all the illegal mining going on in the area, and the forest being a ripe area for them to also go and mine. They are just taking advantage of it.
What will it take for 9 months to have what it takes to fight them? Because we've long known that these illegal mining sites have serious weapons being used by the operators.
Oh, definitely. And I think that that's what 9 months came for. They have the capacity, they have the manpower to really deal with it. I think what is missing is that 9 months had a strategy to deploy permanently to places or forest reserves that have this kind of challenges. So at Atiwa Forest, for example, we need some permanent deployments of 9 months teams in all the 4 locations where miners are assessing the forest, be there for nothing less than 3 months, actively on the ground, ready to arrest and confiscate equipment and destroy them and prosecute them as a follow-up. Until that is done, these miners will see that no action is sufficient, so they will keep going back. And this is where I think even the forestry staff are really complaining about. They are doing their best, but the numbers now is overwhelming. They cannot deal with it alone. The government some time ago promised that or indicated that our forest reserves are no-go areas. They are also security zones. It's unfortunate that we have not seen them act accordingly, and that is why we see this kind of escalating impunity on Atiwa Forest and many others across the country.
We have not seen much impact, you say. So burning of these equipment perhaps may not be enough to discourage these people from going to the reserves.
So we need to have a strategy where we cut off the supply lines completely. If you burn the excavator today, you leave and you go back to Accra, the guys will go back. These guys are undeterred. They are not deterred in any way. Once they know that there's an absence of enforcement and compliance, they go back to Bayside. Until we have permanent teams located in these areas for nothing less than 3 months to cut off the supply completely, deprive these people of the fuel to mine and also of equipment and logistics, even go after the campaigns, there's no way we are going to resolve the situation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bosso, for speaking to us.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
And you had Daryl Bosso. He's Deputy National Director for Arusha, Ghana. Now, the Cybersecurity Authority has fined EY Ghana 360,000 Ghana cedis for providing regulated cybersecurity services without a valid license. The CSA says EY Ghana continued to provide cybersecurity services, including services to owners of critical information infrastructure, despite repeated directives to comply with the licensing requirements under the Cybersecurity Act 2020. The authority says EY Ghana was directed in March this year to apply for a cybersecurity service provider license within 15 days, but failed to comply with 3 separate regulatory directives. The authority again says that the Conduct Breaches Association has petitioned President John Mahama to provide urgent clarity on key issues ahead of the 2026-2027 cocoa purchasing season. In a petition dated August 17, the association said farmers remain concerned about the financial difficulties experienced during the 2025-2026 season and the uncertainties surrounding the new season. The farmers claim that many licensed buying companies and purchasing clerks lacked adequate funds to buy cocoa beans during the minor season, making it difficult for farmers to sell their produce and access much needed income. They say the situation is also affecting their ability to finance farm maintenance, support their families, pay school expenses, and meet healthcare costs. And we'll bring you some more on it. 24 minutes past the hour of 12. This is still the Midday News on 3FM 92.7. Stay with us. We're back with some more. And you're still here on the Midday News on 3FM 92.7. The KNUST Hostel Owners Association is pushing back strongly against moves to control hostel fees, insisting that their facilities do not operate under conventional landlord-tenant arrangement. The association says that any attempt to impose blanket rent controls could threaten accommodation for thousands of students.
The battle over hostel fees is intensifying.
We will have the necessary conversations with owners of hostels, and we will make sure that prices are reasonable for the dear students of this country.
Private hostel owners say they are being unfairly targeted by the rent control authorities, despite providing critical accommodation for students who cannot be housed on campus. President of the KNUST Hostel Owners Association, Bishop Dr. Akwesi Owusubi, says attempts to control hostel fees amount to a wrong approach to the housing challenge.
If they want to control prices, in my own opinion, they should begin from East Lebanon, where prices are quoted in dollars. We don't operate under tenancy law. We operate under licensing law. So we don't say we don't want to be controlled or regulated. We have a system that regulates our operation. So the government doesn't have to now appoint somebody who comes brazenly threatening to close our investment.
The association therefore wants government to develop a specific regulatory framework for student hostels rather than applying conventional rent control measures.
There is that blanket ban purportedly placed on increments or by the rent commissioner, acting rent commissioner. That is not a power given to the acting rent commissioner under the Rent Act and its regulation.
Property economist Dr. Kenneth Donko-Shiamai also believes hostel fees cannot simply be labeled exploitative without evidence.
To be able to identify a fee as exploitative, you need to come up with a comparator, right? You need to come up with some index, something that shows that, well, it should be this amount, but you are charging this. And so this is the excess rent or the excess fees you are charging, for which reason it's exploitative. Just by looking at the absolute amount that hostels are charging, it's very difficult for anyone to admit that hostels are charging or exploiting students.
The debate comes amid growing concerns over the cost of accommodation for students, with hostel fees in some locations running into several thousands of cedis. The hostel owners, however, say the market offers different levels of accommodation, allowing students to choose according to their financial capacity. For now, the hostel owners insist they are not against regulation, but want rules specifically designed for student accommodation and developed in consultation with operators. And they want that if private hostels become financially unviable, the consequences could extend beyond the owners to universities already struggling to provide enough beds for their students.
Ibrahim Abubakar brought us that report from the Ashanti region. And that's it for the Midday News here on 3FM 92.7. My name is Beatrice Adu. Thank you very much for joining us on the program. Log on to shrinews.com for more news.
Hello, good afternoon and welcome to Business Daily on 3FM 92.7. Coming up, tanker drivers strike resolution saves consumers from potential fuel price hike.
We must commend the tanker drivers association and their mother union, which is the tanker owners union, as well as all stakeholders involved.
Also ahead, Bank of Ghana steps up regulatory preparations for non-interest finance as it inaugurates 5-member advisory council for safe and sustainable alternative banking markets.
The bank is also developing an internal supervisory operational manual to support effective regulation and supervision of non-interest banking institutions.
Plus, Association of Ghana Industries, AGI wants electricity bulk billing reversal could force businesses to downsize.
We have always been on the view that these special arrangements are going to cushion industry to grow.
I am Bismarck Kausa. Will bring you details of our headlines and other stories shortly. Please stay. Thanks for accompanying now to the details. Resolving the tanker driver strike protects consumers' pockets. Ghana's downstream petroleum sector narrowly avoided a major operational disruption this week, saving consumers from potentially steep fuel price increases in the near future. The resolution of the industrial action in Kumasi by the Ghana National Petroleum Tanker Drivers Union and their parent bodies has drawn praise from Center for Environmental Management and Sustainable Energy, CEMC, that warned that a prolonged dispute would have ultimately hit the public's wallet. Let's listen to Executive Director of CEMC, Benjamin Insia.
We must commend the tanker drivers association and their mother union, which is the tanker owners union, as well as all stakeholders involved in resolving this particular tanker strike or tanker driver strike issue. I think that they've done tremendously well because this would have negatively impacted the petroleum downstream in a sense that it was likely going to impede effective distribution of the product, especially in the middle belt of the country, and also put a lot of stress on the UPBF fund because in recent times government has suspended the collection of these particular, the UPBF margin, and suspension also means that the available funds is being depleted day by day for paying for the transportation of products from the depot to the retail outlet. So if the strike had continued, what MPA would have done was to allow cross-zonalization of distribution of these products, and that was going to put much pressure or burden on the fund, probably causing a distress of it or pushing it into deficit, which the Ghanaian petroleum consumer is likely going to pay in future.
And that was Executive Director of the Center for Environmental Management and Sustainable Energy, Benjamin Insia. Moving on, the Bank of Ghana is stepping up preparations for the effective implementation of non-interest banking, with measures being developed to ensure strong supervision, sound governance and effective risk management across the emerging market. Speaking at the inauguration of a 5-member Financial Advisory Council in Accra, Head of Banking Supervision, Dr. Ismail Adam, says the central bank is developing an internal supervisory manual to guide staff in regulating non-interest banking institutions consistently.
As part of our commitment to establishing a strong governance structure for the industry, the bank appointed a 5-member Council in June 2026. The Council will provide independent advice on matters relating to compliance with non-interest banking principles and support development of the industry as a whole. Our main purpose here today is to formally inaugurate the Council and benefit from their expertise and guidance on its members. The bank is also developing an internal supervisory operational manual to support effective regulation and supervision of non-interest banking institutions. This manual will provide detailed procedures and guidance for supervisory staff to ensure consistency in regulatory oversight.
As we move from framework development to implementation, our focus will be on strengthening industry capacity, which is key, enhancing stakeholder engagement, promoting public awareness, and attracting investments into the sector.
Dr. Ismail Adam is head of banking supervision at the Bank of Ghana. Meanwhile, advisor on the financing model at the Bank of Ghana, Professor John Gachi, said the council's composition deliberately combines local expertise with international experience while ensuring representation across professional backgrounds and gender as Ghana builds capacity to support the emerging non-finance or non-interest financial sector.
When the governor supported us going around countries like Nigeria, Malaysia, and the rest, we were thinking that we will not be in position to put together qualified people to form the NIFA. But we consciously decided that we want to build what we call local content. So that is why today we see 4 Ghanaians in the list. 3 are resident in Ghana, 1 is resident in Malaysia. That was done consciously so that we can create opportunity to build capacity for the industry. Then we also considered cross-border learning. So that is the reason why we have a chairman with vast experience that will be guiding and steering the affairs of the NIFA to achieve the aim that we set for ourselves. Then the third underpinnings of the selection is religious neutrality.
And that was advisor on non-interest banking and finance, Professor John Gachi. Moving away from the financial sector, the Association of Ghana Industries, AGI, has raised concerns that the government's decision to reverse the electricity bulk billing arrangement could force some businesses to downsize to remain operational. Speaking on Business Focus, the Greater Accra chairman of the AGI, Chonam Akpelu, said the move has already increased electricity costs for some members by about 46% this year.
We have always been on the view that these special arrangements are going to cushion industry to grow. And so for us to be almost in the middle of the year, and then all of a sudden, we now wake up to a situation where the cost of this specialized arrangement is going to go up about 40%. We believe it's not fair to industry, especially with the situation that only a handful of these companies involved are consulted. A lot of them, they just wake up one morning and realize that the cost of power has gone up. And our view is that this is really going to affect industry in a big way, especially that the cost of power constitutes about 30% of the overall production. And it will not only end there, it would go to affect the eventual final consumer, and it will affect industry in many other ways. I can imagine that there will be unemployment as a result of that, because people have to cut down production as a result of this high cost.
And that was Greater Accra chairman of the AGI, Chonam Akpelu. Meanwhile, senior lecturer and financial economist at the University of Professional Studies, Accra, Dr. Eric Boachi-Yadom, stressed the need to address inefficiencies within the Electricity Company of Ghana, ECG, rather than further burdening businesses that are already compliant.
Time and again, ECG in some report and other recognized bodies reports have stated that the inefficiencies in the power sector is high. Power that is lost in transmission, those that are using utilities and power, they are not paying for it, it's keep going up. So I'm not sure it is fair to pile the inefficiency and those who don't pay for power. We should pile it on the few that are loyal or attempting to contribute their bit. So I think we should find ways to reduce the inefficiencies in the system. That is one of them. Another is to be able to have a strategic plan to wean some sectors off the national grid by promoting solar.
And that was senior lecturer and financial economist at the University of Professional Studies, Accra, UPSA, Dr. Eric Bwachiyadom. And that brings us to the end of Business Daily on 3FM 92.7 with me, Bismarck Ousa. For more business stories, please check out our website 3news.com. Thanks for your company.